All right, Genesis 19, let's call this one B. Why? Because I'm going to try to use an old preacher trick by using a set of threes to talk about why we should, one, be kind, two, be careful. And if we're kind and careful, God willing, we will be able to be thankful as God provides us new opportunities to move forward in life. First of all, why be kind? Well, in this story, if you're familiar with it at all, this is the famous story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot in this particular instance is going to show his kindness to two strangers, not realizing that those two strangers are eventually there to show kindness to him. And so he sees them in the town square. Probably not the best idea to stay there, but that's where they're planning to stay. So he encourages them to please stay with him. And that's exactly what they do. And not only does he give them hospitality, or hospitality in the way of a roof over their heads, safe from what could possibly happen to them in the town square, he cooks them a feast. And so on the spot, who does that anymore? And so that just gives you an indication of when the Bible is describing Lot as a righteous man, it's not doing it without cause. And so this is one of the things that we see: an individual willing to not just show hospitality, but to go over and above. And it's not very unlike what we saw in Abraham a few chapters before, when, really, I think just the previous chapter, when he meets three strangers. He shows hospitality, specifically offering them rest and refreshment, not realizing that one of those strangers is really there to refresh him and encourage him that the weight that he is experiencing for his son is not in vain. And so he is refreshing those who were really sent to refresh him. And how many times in life does it just work out that way? How many times in life does it just work out that way? When we show kindness to people who we don't realize are really capable of blessing us more than we've ever imagined. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to set the habit in your character of being kind, because how embarrassing is it to treat people poorly when you might never know the ways in which they were willing to bless you, but for the way we might have treated them, even if it was just a momentary lapse in character and judgment. Down south, we call it home training. Try to always keep our home training at a high level. Just on general principle. We're not supposed to be kind to people just because they can do stuff for us, but it's extra embarrassing when we let our home training slip and we end up insulting people who really were there for our best interest. But Lot didn't have to worry about that because he showed the kindness. Second of all, he was wise in a place where the men of Sodom were not. Why? Because they were not so kind. They were looking to exploit those men for whatever they could get. And ultimately, they made a huge mistake of not being careful to look past the physical matchup. You say sometimes in the sporting realm, styles make fights, and they might have looked at their numbers and looked at the two men and simply said, well, why not try them? Well, it's because those two men are there to try you, and they are more than what they look like. And even if these two men weren't angels, bringing it into the current, it's still wise to be very careful in the way that we approach people. Why? Because the Bible specifically says God uses the weak things of this world to humble the mighty. And so we have to be careful, especially as Christians, to realize sometimes we can get caught up in doing the physical math in a situation, not realizing that God uses underdogs to make a point. And that's what the men of Sodom missed out on. Third, if we can get those things locked into our character, being kind and being careful, particularly being humble in the way that we approach other people, sometimes people who seem like they are weaker, then God willing, as opportunities open up for us, we can be thankful enough about the transition that we don't get tempted to look back, because the famous part of the story is Lot's wife. Looking back turns into a pillar of salt. And if you've ever been in a bad situation, you can understand no matter how bad it is, sometimes you create emotional connections that are hard to let go of. So it's hard to criticize Lot's wife. Why? Because if you've ever been there in a situation you know you need to move on from, but you still have love for the situation of the people there, sometimes it can be tough to move. But when God opens those doors, I pray that we go through them, and I pray that he give us the kind of peace of mind that doesn't tempt us to look back when it's time to simply move forward. And I haven't said it in a while, but God's best to you as you go forward in him. And like I explained in the sermon not too long ago, I say that because as much as I want to simply say God bless everybody, we talked about the whole concept of being safe to bless not too long ago. I want to say God bless everybody, but I really want the blessings to fall on people who are committed to doing the right thing. So God's best to you as you go forward in him.